Could you talk a little bit about dating apps? Do you use them? What do you think about them?
Oh, I love them. It's like right by your fingertips.
Welcome to Curious and Unqualified, a podcast about life in academia. I'm Eric Edlund, professor of physics.
I'm Jerry Jimenez, professor in Foundations and Social Advocacy Department, Education.
And it's my pleasure today to welcome, as our first guest in season 2, Kuba Shuleko, who's a former student of mine who graduated last spring with a degree in physics. So, Kuba, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself right now. You are currently in a master's program at Cornell.
Yeah, that is correct. I finished up with my physics degree this May, and I am enrolled in a master's program at Cornell in chemical engineering. And its expected graduation date being spring 2026.
A pretty quick turnaround time, 1 year.
Yeah.
What do you think of the program? And I think you mentioned before the show that it's not quite what you expected. So maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Definitely. So in undergrad, I got involved in research, doing a lot of research in polymer chemistry, and having taken a lot of physics classes, I found a nice intersection between the two, and so I wanted to pursue kind of like a combination of both, and I felt like chemical engineering was the path to do so. And when my time was finishing up in undergrad, I sent out a couple applications for the master's program, and I got accepted into a couple, that being Syracuse, University at Buffalo, Stony Brook, but ultimately decided to do Cornell. And I really thought it was going to be a lot more, theoretical based kind of lecture classes, but it seems like what they have right now is a lot of the curriculum focused on data science and programming. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of weeks since the semester started. I think 3 out of 5 classes I have or it's going to be closer to 4 now, because one of these classes, like a professional development class where we're working on a project, like a capstone project, at the end of the next semester. And so we get the freedom to choose which direction we want to go in. And they have a lot of projects focused on, they call it DAISY, which is data science and artificial intelligence. So that's what it's giving that I'm going to be going into that realm for my project.
Let's shift to the social. And so one of the things we talked about last season is there's a very significant trend, less men are going to college. And it's not clear exactly the reasons why. There's different speculations. Some of it is that men have more opportunities for jobs that don't require college. Some of it is that men lean more conservative and they find maybe institutions too liberal, and so they avoid them. And so we're just kind of curious, what was your experience like being a man in college? Like, did you feel that it was equally accessible and available to you and it was meant for you? Or so just kind of broadly talk about like what it means to be a male in college when we're in this climate of less men going to college over time.
Well, in undergrad and even now in my graduate classes, there's a predominantly male.
Because of the field you're in.
Yeah, the field is. So I think I've seen a lot more females in the grad classes than I did in undergrad, but you have to account for the school population. So there is that. I've never really looked when I started off. I never really looked at the classroom or what I was learning through any like gender dynamics. So I never felt like, oh, this material wasn't for me. If anything, it felt like I wasn't studying hard enough to do this. And I think it was really helpful in that sense, because it didn't make me come up with excuses for like, oh, like this isn't for me, or it's just I know what I want and I'm gonna like get it by just studying harder. So I never really saw anything. I haven't heard anything in the classroom about the differences between males and females, but I feel like it's a lot more predominant in the social part of college than in the academic.
So maybe you didn't have this experience yourself, but you have. I think you lived in a house with a number of other guys, and they were probably not physics majors, if I recall. So you maybe have something of an insight into their experience from talking to them. How did you, like, looking through their experiences? Did they approach? Do you think they approached their college experience similarly to you by putting in a good effort, or do you think that fundamentally there was like they, I don't know, I mean, did they come to college to party, I guess is what I'm asking. Like, is there something
Or
different?
because other people expected them to, or they need to for a job, but they weren't really checked into like enjoyment of learning.
So I feel like I have like a two-part answer. One being that I also, in the house I lived with, I lived with a couple girls too, so I also saw differences in that. And the second being that while I didn't hear anything from them, I we've had discussions that their friends from back home felt like they were pressured to go to college because they had no other choice. And one of the friends actually was wanted to do construction, but somehow just ended up being in college and doing and switched his major a couple times while there, eventually getting into something like construction management or some. And it it was a little like confusing to see, but because it's like if you felt like you had no reason to come here or like you had no choice, like it doesn't really make sense to like jump head first and dish out however much money he paid for the first semester of college to go there. But I do feel like there's a lot of social pressure on people to go through school, especially with how like social media is, where it's highlighting the best of the best. And so you see people going to college, graduating all the time, and it's like, okay, well, I have to do that to be successful. And that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of trades that you can get into that will provide success. And obviously, at the end of the day, it's like dependent upon how do you define the success. Is it monetary? Is it being able to provide for your family? Is it you being happy? So it's a lot of different faces to that. But in terms of the kind of the co-gendered or co-ed parts of my house, I had a lot of discussions with one of the friends. It was so I graduated my undergrad in 3 years, so I'm gonna refer to like the third year is when we lived at this one house, and now we live in a different house. So in the third year, I lived on the first floor with all the girls, and then upstairs were the rest of the guys. It was kind of separated, so I saw or I would hear different parts of topics that we would talk about or conversations from their side, like the girls' side, and then from the guys' side. And I felt like one of these one of the ladies would bring up an actual interesting point in how in her classes she felt like there were the guys that were in her classes would try to sound smarter than they actually were, or try to drown out their female counterparts in the class with their opinions. And I never really understood that because her major was education, history education, so it's a little bit different from physics. And so I never really had like this who's more right. But it was definitely eye-opening when she would say stuff like that, where you would have people just kind of talk over or even try to make you sound like stupid because they felt like they were better than you, coming from just being a guy, you know?
Well, it's great to hear that because I actually remember I got my PhD when I was in my 30s, and I remember a female. We were at some seminar, and she pointed out, notice how the women speak differently to the professor than the men. And I was just like, okay, and I just kind of like sat back and observed, and like, yeah, there was a certain arrogance like laden in how the men were approaching versus the women were kind of more deferent and like I might not be understanding this. And so it's kind of interesting, like, wow, it took me to my 30s to realize that these gender dynamics are regularly happening in class, right? And so it's really encouraging to hear you already noticing this at a younger age, like that women are having this separate experience. Well, one thing I want to ask about is, do you have if I say the word manosphere, do you know what that means?
Manosphere. I don't know what like manosphere means, but I feel like what you like explain it to be is going to be something I'm familiar with, but in a different.
So when our guests our female Gen Z guests from last episode talked about how some of the men they encountered are big fans of like on social media and YouTube, people that are in various degrees of conservative, and they kind of like on the kind of entry level is more like Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson, and then on kind of like further down, like really deep into misogyny is like Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of curious, like, do those names ring a bell? Do you have any kind of interact with them? Do you ever listen to them? Do you have friends that listen to them? And just kind of your thoughts on the ideas that come out of this manosphere.
Oh, that's a very good point. I feel like there are you have to be careful with this, because there's some podcasters like Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, who's more than a podcaster, but they bring up good ideas, they bring up interesting debates, and those are things you could kind of like sit down and actually listen to, right? I think both of them have written books too, so you can go into that. So I wholeheartedly welcome people to listen to that and have discussions with them about, and then I love to hear what they have to say about that. But then when you go further down to things like Andrew Tate, I feel like that's just when it gets silly, because you see more of that guy on TikTok than you do speaking or having like an intellectual discussion. And the stuff that he says is just maybe as like, a prepubescent boy, like you think, oh wow, like this guy's cool. But then you get a little older and you see like the stuff that he says is a little like it's problematic, and it's you just can't endorse that type of behavior. And so it's more so like when I hear that name, it's just like a meme to me. It's just like it's just silly almost, yeah. And especially with the things happening, from what I've heard, like they were getting placed on house arrest, him and his brother, and there's just so much problems with that whole thing.
It's good to hear you say that. But looking out at the currents you swim in the moment here. I mean, Andrew Tate is certainly a name that is popular because people listen to him and respect him. And I think, like, I've only seen ever a few clips of him, so I really am very ignorant of this guy. But my guess is that he has a larger audience than just prepubescent boys. So, like, amongst your guy friends or when you're out at the bar or whatever, like, do you hear his name come up? And if so, like, is it with a sense of derision or with a sense of respect?
Honestly, when I hear his name come up, and I think of it as a joke, but sometimes I see people actually take it serious at like this age. Like they kind of agree with what they're saying. I don't hear a lot of it, but I seen a friend of a friend say something like that, and I'm just I wonder like, oh, like, okay, but it's just I've never really heard like a good point come from that whole thing. So that's why I'm always like not really taking it too serious. And so with Andrew Tate, it's more so like, okay, like this guy's just joking. He's saying it for the memes at the bar, just trying to be funny with his friends. But then when you go down the scale and you kind of get to people like Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson, I do see actually like my close friend that lives at home, in the house that we're at for school. He actually has a book by Jordan Peterson and listens to him, and I can actually have a discussion about what he has to say, and we can have disagreements, but it's a civil discussion. It's pretty interesting to see that those figures. I think I saw Jordan Peterson actually end up on a Jubilee video on YouTube, and it was him versus 20 atheists or something like that. So it's you can have people who listen to him and be like, okay, like whatever you say, like I can respect it and I could hear you say it. But then the further down you get to the scale with like Andrew Tate, it's just like I really haven't heard a solid point come from that.
And so what would be one example of a thing you find valuable about listening to Jordan Peterson? What's something that like he said that resonated with you?
I seen, like I said, that video that I've heard him talk, and I feel like the way he argues, or not argues, but debates, like he gives respect to the person that they're arguing with, or they're talking to. I haven't really read his material, so there is that where I don't have too much knowledge on that, but my friend is really big into him, so like I see a lot of his like conservative viewpoints come from that, because I know they associate the conservatism with him, so I just kind of like put two and two together.
Was it almost more, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that what draws you to a speaker is the way in which they engage in conversation and show a willingness to consider other perspectives might be even more important than necessarily like remembering the specific content and ideas. Like you're drawn to someone because you feel they have this kind of respect for learning tone, as opposed to obviously someone like Andrew Tate, is just completely off the wall.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because even like right now, I'd be like, okay, like maybe Andrew Peterson said something, I could still listen to him. Or Jordan Peterson. I'm sorry, I'm confusing the two. Jordan Peterson said something. I could sit down and listen to it. It's very accepting in how he talks. But then if you go watch, or like, for instance, if you go on TikTok and you look up like Andrew Tate, you kind of find other figures associated with him. I think there's one called Marlon. He also has a podcast. There's Sneeko, who was like also a big thing like 2 years ago, kind of around COVID. And then there's this other guy who's like utterly like insufferable, where you see just like clips of somebody on a podcast say something they disagree, and it's just shutting them down completely, or even saying something like a broad generalization that sounds so stupid that it's just like your mind as a viewer just shuts down because of how ridiculous what they have to say. So it's like you find it hard to even like listen to what they have to say.
So some people will, professors will argue, Jordan Peterson is a gateway drug to Andrew Tate. In other words, like if you listen to him, you're being primed to be more open down to the eyes of Andrew Tate. That hasn't applied to you. You're drawing a clear distinction there. So what do you think is the difference between you, who can see some value in considering Jordan Peterson's ideas, but outright dismiss Andrew Tate, versus those who do actually first find Jordan Peterson, find the message appealing, and then the algorithms lead them eventually to Andrew Tate? So what's the difference between the two of you?
I love that question. I think it's a matter of experience and perspective. So I lived longer than some, than high schoolers. So I've kind of seen more things. And with seeing more things, you see different perspectives, which I think I'm grateful for. I'm extremely grateful for. And I think I contributed to where I grew up, because I grew up on Long Island in Copic, and it's a pretty diverse area, right? And so I was able to have a lot of discussions with people who, don't look like me or come from a different background. And as such, I was able to hear ideas or their side of politics that somebody who looks like me and had the same type of life experiences isn't saying. So it's like I'm able to get different sides of the arguments, and so I'm able to keep these in the back of my mind, because you can't dismiss, one of my friends saying something, how they experienced a racist incident at Home Depot. You can't dismiss that and say, oh, like that's not true, that didn't happen, because who am I to say that didn't happen? I hear that, and then that sticks with me. So like when I see somebody like Andrew Tate saying something very broad about women or whatever, it's just like, okay, like this man has clearly never, spoke to anybody outside of his circle that aren't yes men. I think it's very important to have people challenge what you believe and have discussions with those people, because you see where they're coming from, and then that can make you change your mind. So a lot of people that go down this path of just like hard right conservatism and Andrew Tate, I feel like they allow people, they don't allow anybody into their into their circle that isn't emphasizing their ideas. And I think when I took that philosophy class that we talked about earlier, they call that an echo chamber. So you just have people blaring out the same stuff, and you just keep going down further and further.
Right, and the algorithms and tech are designed to do that, to keep you engaged.
Exactly.
So you've brought up politics a couple times here, not directly, but I'm curious first, like about your views. If you'd be willing to share, kind of just out of curiosity, where you kind of picture yourself on the spectrum of left to right, and then thinking about the bigger question here, kind of getting back to what we were talking earlier about the social dynamics regarding young men. If your young men are going to college, right, we have kind of like a pattern of young men kind of dropping out, not succeeding as much as young women or they used to. And also a move of more young men to the right and more young women to the left. So there's a growing political divide between the men and women in this age. I'm curious what your understanding, if you have an understanding of that, or like a feeling on like why that is so. Like, are young men being drawn to the right, or are they being? Does it seem like they're being pushed away by the left?
I want to contribute that divide to a lot of social media, in particular TikTok. I feel like TikTok has done it, I use it every day. Like I go to sleep and I'm scrolling through TikToks. It's a nice little way to decompress. But I feel like it has drawn such a divide in people because people say I've read something or I've seen something about this, but mostly it's their information from TikTok, right? So you have this like funny trend going around where it's on TikTok where a guy's gonna be like, oh, like you got soft hands, brother, referring to somebody who is like white collar, right? Somebody going to school, somebody not like working with their hands, and it's typically like blue collar people saying that. So I've seen like this kind of like shift to like people on TikTok like being like, oh, we're gonna do blue collar because we got like tougher hands and we work harder than people who aren't in this industry. And that as a joke already has like these big effects. You have people arguing and actually being serious in the comments, and it's like the whole point is it's supposed to be a joke. Now you take it to something like politics, which is even more like invasive in people's life. Like whether you feel like you're working harder than somebody else, that's up for debate. But like everyone has their ideas on politics, and so you get on TikTok and you start liking things. Algorithm, tailors the thing for you, and then you see this, oh, like the left is this way or the right is this way, and then you get more of your material, so you start feeling animosity towards the other side and more in agreement to your side, and so it doesn't help that what you're consuming is tailored for you. It's not giving you an outside perspective. And even if you do get a weird TikTok or not a weird TikTok, but a TikTok outside of your like belief system, you can either press not interested, so it would prevent you from seeing it, or people usually comment like, oh, I ended up on the wrong side of TikTok, or how did I get behind enemy lines, so you see this like there's like an unwillingness to learn even if you get something presented to you in front of your face.
So your comment that you started out with here about the kind of the blue collar joke about having soft hands, I think is interesting. And it sounds like maybe what happens sometimes is that young men like yourself, or maybe like somehow kind of stumble upon this stuff, and it somehow maybe, I don't know, the fact that you come upon it means that there's some connecting ideas that thread that to other things that you're interested in. Do you see that as kind of like that aspect of what you're talking about there in the algorithms as actually steering people to the right, like young men like yourself in particular? Or is it something else that young men are feeling a need to seek that out, like that's filling a void that they're not getting from somewhere else? Do you see what I'm saying? Like the difference is like, is it like either conscious or not, is it a seeking out of a thing that's missing in their lives, or is it really kind of the effect of external forces pushing you in a direction?
I think it's a mix of both. My idea on it, and it may not be true, but I feel like it's almost like a retaliation towards school. So you have a young man that goes through school all the way through high school and doesn't get the best education that they like, maybe, and this can be due to a variety of things in the area, maybe not enough budgets, not enough funding for the budget, or the type of teachers they had, and so they go through the school system and they realize like, oh, I hate school, I'm gonna do the complete opposite. Whereas it's more so like you just haven't had the right experience yet. But that's difficult to tell somebody who hasn't, oh, like keep doing this. That's something you've had so much like negative feelings towards. Like you just gotta keep doing it because it's gonna get better eventually. And then you have that social media aspect, like, oh, I hate school, I don't want to do it. And then you have something like blue collar pop up on your TikTok, and you're like, okay, like I can get certified within a couple months and start working. Like and that convenience really makes it, I feel like, a lot more people drawn to than pursuing school, because some people just don't like how sitting in the classroom and taking in the material from a lecture, so their brains work differently, and I think that's a big part of it. Aside from that, I can't think of anything else besides social media in general steering people away from school, because Oh, funny enough, there's I think someone who was in the same year as me when I entered college, right, going through school in SUNY Cortland, was on a team, and actually this summer I think I've seen things with him dropping out of school and pursuing a career as a like a YouTuber or podcaster. So he goes and makes YouTube videos, and he's gotten a following. But I think that type of behavior you see a lot more today because of how people like in like I guess the early 2010s, you've had people just make YouTube videos blow up like through Vine. I feel like Vine was a minute ago. I think that was when I was in middle school, and so people see this quick of I can post a video and get millions and they get sponsorships, and they think, oh, I don't need school for this, and so they pivot into doing something like that. So a lot of people have these influences around them that kind of like keep them or prevent them from wanting to pursue additional education or just finish through with their education, which is kind of weird because it's like you see the success with this one person, but you don't see how many other people haven't made it.
So we're now living 9 months through the second Trump administration. I was wondering if you can, from your view, what, if anything, is better? Do you support? Are you glad that has changed in the past 9 months? And what, if anything, do you think is worse? Do you not support? Do you think is worse that he's been elected?
I feel like the thing that I've seen most impactful towards me is like I've seen so many teachers say how like their budgets have been cut for research, and so this makes applying to PhD programs a lot more harder because they simply don't have the funding to take on additional students, and it's kind of like a little annoying because it's like right when I'm supposed to be applying, they don't have the funding, and it's just like, and it's easy for me to be like, oh, it's because of him, and I don't want to be so quick to be like, oh, it's because of this administration, they don't have the money, that's it. But it's just like, it feels like that's what's been happening as of recently. Like, it's just been budget cut after budget cut after budget cut, and they just don't have the money. So I'm like, the longer the time goes on, the more months go by, I just feel like this kind of resentment. Like, it's like, oh, like I once supported you, and now I feel like I'm getting screwed over with how like my education is going. So I have mixed feelings about this. It's like, well, if I don't, didn't support him, would the latter option, the Biden-Harris administration, have done a better job? And it's like so easy to be like, what if this, what if that? And it's just, I simply can't,
So you said you once supported him. What was it about his platform that you did support?
I mean, when his first time getting elected 2016, I was still living with my father was still living with me, so I had that his ideas kind of come into my head, so it was kind of like an echo chamber at first, and then second time around, I was able to kind of have more of my I lead my own thinking because my father wasn't present at this point in my life, and so it made me really like stand back and kind of get more central in terms of the spectrum of left and right. And I was a big Second Amendment supporter because that's something I grew up doing. So I kind of associated that with the right wing party. And so I'm like, okay, like they get bonus points for this. But then there are things like the abortion debate that kind of put me towards more the middle. And it's just like, you have these kind of different things that I feel like I get from both extremes, but because they're both extremes, they kind of level me out in the middle. And then come the second election, I remember it was right on, I think it was like election day, and I spoke to you, Dr. Edlin, and I was just like, yeah, I just don't think I'm gonna like cast a vote. And we just had a conversation, and it just felt like at the end of it, I was just like, if I don't go to vote, like that's just kind of like, it's squabbling my freedoms. Like, I have the right to vote. Why not just exercise it? And so I thought about it, and I was just like, well, I'm not really I don't see any improvements in what under the Biden-Harris administration from the beginning to end. So like let's pick a new person. Let's see what they have to offer. And so I casted my vote, and yeah, since then it's just I've really just seen the thing in education, but there's also been a lot of war and strife that's been happening in the Middle East. So I've seen that, and I've seen something that there might be a ceasefire or end to the fight at the end of the week. I'm not sure entirely.
Well, it's being proposed by the Trump administration. Yeah. I haven't heard at this point that anything has been agreed upon. But yeah. So looking kind of a little bit more national. I mean, we could talk about the international scene as well, but just thinking nationally about what's going on. What's your feeling, kind of the vibe at the moment in the country? I've had many interesting conversations over the last few weeks, and people have expressed everything from being hopeful to the future to being very nihilistic. And so I don't know, where do you sit on that? I mean, so you've talked a little bit about your individual prospects or maybe difficulties getting a job or getting into a graduate PhD program. Do you generally have a sense of hope that these are like bumps in the road and the future is going to be bright, or does it seem like we're heading down a dark path?
Oh, I always want to remain hopeful. I feel like having a pessimistic or a nihilistic point of like kind of headspace to have is just it's not enjoyable, right? You have one life, you have a set amount of time, and you can either spend that time being like, oh, nothing's gonna work out, or I could stay hopeful and be like, well, this is just a bump in the road, things are gonna get better. And so I like to stay hopeful, even though if things seem a little daunting, and that I feel like is the important part, because whether it's in academia or personal life, like recently we talked about how I did the ultra marathon a couple weeks ago, and through it, if I said I don't like this, I don't know why I'm doing this, then I wouldn't have finished through. But it's about staying hopeful and positive that things are eventually going to get better is what gets you through the end. And so I that's why I have like still some hope in the administration that things are going to improve in terms of that education. I can't speak on anything else really too much, but yeah, I'm trying to stay hopeful, and that's all you can do, you know. Life is too short to be negative.
So that's social political, but I'm also curious, does that also apply to environmental issues? Like, how concerned are you about climate change, other major issues like biodiversity loss and plastification of the world, that those issues will only get worse, or it's up to us to decide how bad they get, or maybe there's even a path in which we can have the future be better? So yeah, just kind of talk a little bit about what environmental issues concern you the most, and how much impacts your life on a daily basis as far as like anxiety or even your life plans.
Well, I definitely feel like there is climate change, and if there's people who deny it, it's just like, you know, take a look at the numbers. Like, there definitely is. So there's no need to deny that. In terms of that biodiversity, and you said what, plastification?
Yeah, just like all the nanoplastics and the microplastics.
It's funny you say that, because we have this joke in my house. One of our friends is a very almond person. When I say almond, they're very conscientious of their health, you know, and so they don't want to use plastic utensils. They don't want to use plastic plates, plastic anything, because of the microplastics and how, you know, it's apparently like messing up your endocrinology system. And whether that's true or not, I'm not entirely sure, and we just like make fun of him. We say we cut on him because it's like, oh, like I'm gonna put microplastics in your drink or something like this, and he gets upset. But it's like, I don't know, I feel like you wouldn't have seen this if it wasn't for, like I said, TikTok and Instagram being like putting this stuff out there, where people you have really far on the spectrum being like, yeah, you can't have microplastics. You got to cook your food in seed oils. Like you can't have any blue light. And it's just like all that stuff, I feel like, just makes people like have these habits that are a little, you know, eccentric. But you know, I respect it if anything.
But thinking longer term, beyond the next 4 years, right? Maybe things, as you said, maybe things will get better, maybe they'll get worse. Who knows? The next 4 years. What's your gut sense for the long term, like your lifetime, right? Thinking about career, family. Again, are you carrying that sense of hope forward in the long term, or thinking about the things we just discussed? Are you nervous about those prospects?
I'm not. I'm not really nervous. I feel like if everyone has a right to feel how they feel, but if you're just getting nervous about this stuff, it's very. You can use your time or your mental efforts in a better way, because there's not really much you can do about it, and so it's something you should devote effort to in something else. So like, instead of focusing on, oh, what about the microplastics, what about the climate, you can focus on things like your family, or the effort you can put into school, bettering your physical health, stuff that's controllable. I feel like when you talk about the plastics, the strife that's happening in the world, and the climate, like, you can try to do your part, and this is something I felt very strong about, is you can try to do your part about, being recycling and taking care of the environment, but then you have people, CEOs and superstars and anyone who has money, taking private jets to fly between cities. And I feel like if you do the math on how much CO2 emissions they produce from that, the cost that it takes to produce the gas that they're flying on, and how much CO2 emissions come from producing that gas, it's just like, you picking up the cans outside your house isn't really going to do much, or we're not drinking from plastic straws or using plastic bags. Like, it's things like that like people are pushing on you, and it's, I feel like, very like hypocritical, because then you have people in power doing things like that, and you're like, so what's my effort really going to do in doing that? So I try not to worry myself too much with that things, and just kind of control the controllables,
So we're almost on an hour, and I see one camera's about to lose its battery, but I just want to pivot to just a lighter direction.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about dating apps? Do you use them? What do you think about them?
Oh, I love them. It's like right by your fingertips, and it's like, you don't really have to try too hard anymore. And I know that's like a bad thing to say, but really, like, if you have it like that, like, if you're you're semi good looking, and you're not like, you can carry a conversation with anybody, and you're not like crazy, like, it's pretty easy to kind of meet new people and talk. And I feel like the way colleges, or especially the way our town is made, is like, there really isn't much for college students to do outside of the bar, right? If you want to do something, you have to leave the city, go to Ithaca, go to Syracuse, kind of find things to do. And so it makes this like very easy, where you have Instagram, and then you have Tinder, Hinge, Bumble, whatever people use. You can just put yourself out there, people see you, and then you get this attention. So you see this, and it's people that you normally wouldn't approach, because you don't think that they are attracted to you. You can clearly, you see on their phone, they're texting you, you're like, okay, I'm gonna go up to them, talk to them, like, why not? Because there's nothing, you see that like through the apps, and it's something I feel like that's kind of taken away from like the thrill of going up in person and talking to different,
And maybe getting rejected.
because I feel like, even myself, I think I'm scared of rejection in some regard to that. So I won't really like go up to different girls. Like, I'll have them come up to me, because I know I won't get rejected if you're coming up to me. And so it's fun for me, but it's just, I feel like it takes away from that, like, okay, like, am I gonna get dumped, or am I gonna get told to like mess up, like, go away? And it's just, I don't know, I find it very convenient. It's very fun, and I just, especially in college, I feel like there's a lot of lust that happens, so it makes the whole thing even more emphasized.
You have any questions for us? You generously shared a lot of your thoughts here.
Either anything we talked about or anything at all.
Do you see any differences in college now, in terms of like the social aspect of like how men and women interact, compared to when you guys were going through school?
Well, it's a little hard to say, since I don't feel like I have a good lens into what goes on,
I got you.
amongst you all outside of class. But I mean, I can speak to what I see in the class, and kind of immediately outside of class with our students. And I think by and large, our students are not socially engaged like we used to be. It's really hard. And maybe you all are really good about getting together and having a good time on your own, and you don't need us to like encourage that, But I know, like in the physics department, I tried over the last year, and I think I was decently successful to make events, right?
Physics Friday.
Yeah, Physics Fridays, and I know you enjoyed that, but still, I'd say like the attendance that we had at those events was a fraction of what I would have hoped for and what I would have expected based upon my experience as an undergrad. So that aspect seems quite different to me.
Yeah, I would say the obviously, like you mentioned before, this like not getting rejected, you could try it out first. Like that's a whole other element, which in some ways might make you cast a wider net of people you might try to engage with, because it's a lot. It's not as harsh to get it rejected over an app than in person. But I think the flip side, a really downside to technology, is with the ability to kind of record at any moment and upload at any moment. I feel like people do take less risks because there might be this fear. Well, like if I do something and someone's recording me, and I don't know, like my life could be ruined because that thing of me, whether I'm saying something or I'm doing something silly, could be put on the internet and it's there forever. Yeah. And so I think, I don't know, and I probably don't want to know what the college party scene is like, but I suspect there's probably more reservations on behavior because of that ability to record anything than there were in my day. When no one ever thought at any time, the shenanigans you might engage in a party, would stay at that party, and that would be it.
So you're saying we had the better parties?
I think objectively, just on the technology thing, not like a generational thing, just the technology alone would suggest maybe our parties were a little bit, more wild. My guess is, but again, that's just my assumption. Maybe I really don't know what's going on there. Like
maybe we can do some undercover work here.
Maybe Kuba can do some undercover work.
I wish I could have experienced that in my thing, because I feel like a lot of my friends just get to the bar sometimes or at the pregame and just everyone's on their phone and it just takes away from the energy in the room.
And there's idea of recording your experience too, right? It's not just about like having an experience. It's like, how do I record this and market this to my networks about the experience I'm having, right?
It's I hate seeing that, because it's not about what you pretend to be. It's like you sit there and enjoy the moment and then don't forget about it, but store it. You don't have to take a picture and
store it in this ancient computer that's evolved over 300,000 years. Right.
Yeah. And one of the cringiest things is when you see a young couple out at dinner on a date, right? And they're sitting there and they're both like wanting to be somewhere else, or it's like, why are you even trying this?
Exactly.
Hopefully you've never had that experience.
Oh no, I don't have that problem at all.
Good. Don't imagine.
All right. Well, Kuba, thank you very much for coming out and chat with us. I also learned a whole lot of not just your perspective, but like words like almond. I never knew. Is that like a general term, almond?
Like almond dad, almond mom, almond.
It's kind of like the granola crunchy.
Yeah.
Type
Okay. So that's basically what it is, granola. Yeah. So new terms.
Yeah. Certainly appreciate you coming out. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you guys for having me. Had a great time.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, folks. That's it for episode 2. We'll see you back at episode 3.